Moon can do. There you go.
Brahmacho lokadhipati sahampati Patanjali anadivaram ayachata Santitho satta parajatika Dese tu dhammam onukam umam pacham.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Moon is from Bangladesh, so Pali language is very good. You still studying it? More than mine. So, think about trust then. Trusting in awareness. I think it's important to emphasize, I think always, that we talk on two levels in Buddhism. One is the worldly level, worldly concerns, morality, social responsibility, etc. And then we talk about our inner world, where we talk about stream of consciousness. So there's a different language that gets used. The language of social consciousness and morality is about I. I undertake the precept to refrain from harming any living being. It's not the language of anatta. There's no one who killed that person. It doesn't work that way. So it's always good to remember those two levels, because if you get them mixed up, you get very confused. Anatta is very, very confusing. And the joke is the student goes to the Roshi and says, well, there's not self. What does it matter if I kill someone? And Roshi kicks him in the shin. There's your not self. So there are these two levels. And when you talk about trust, I'm not talking about worldly dharmas. So, for instance, we're getting our firewood delivered now. Most of it we've stacked. And we ordered one load of 4 cords from a local supplier and another 4 cords, I think, from another supplier. But this supplier we knew. And when they deliver the wood, they just bring it in a trailer and dump it. And then we stack it at the various cabins that we have. So Venerable Padipo, who's got a sharp eye for these things, once he had stacked it, he realized we were 1 cord short. So we had 3 out of 4. And when it was in a pile, it's impossible to see unless you're really, really acute in that way. So what did he say? Well, I'll just trust. No. He phoned the dealer up. And he said, we're short a cord. Sent him pictures of what we had. The supplier said, ooh, sorry. We've got a new guy working. Thanks for telling us. He's not that sharp in counting sticks of wood or whatever he said. And they brought another cord very quickly. So that's worldly dharmas. So if you said just trust and awareness, yeah, look at that. There's only 1 cord less. There's 1 cord less. I'll just trust in that. No, doesn't make sense. So please remember that differentiation. But when we talk about cultivation, we certainly talk about the foundation of good contemplative work and good cultivation is a good lifestyle, certainly. But having that in place, then we're talking about stream of consciousness. And this is where the ideas of dependent origination, anicca dukkha anatta, they come in very, very importantly. So in that sense, in stream of consciousness, where does trust fit in terms of peace, in terms of a life which is happy? That'd be good enough. Where does that fit in? How does that work? That's the way you need to think about it in this way. So trust for me is the hard side of it. It's not like a contractual arrangement with life. I shake hands with life and I'll trust you because you'll bring me a cord of wood. It's more down here, isn't it? Whereas what I distrust a lot is the ego thinking mind, which is up here more. The complaining mind or the worrisome mind or whatever that creates narratives of self driven by habits of a lifetime. And that, through experience, I think most of us don't trust that. At least I don't, because it's lied to me so many times. So then, I'm not dismissing functional thinking. So functional thinking is important. So right now I'm trying to design a rug using this Scandinavian way of weaving, and it's very complicated, and I'm not good in color. So yeah, that's fun. That's a fun way to use thought and creativity and so on. This is not about functional thinking. This is more about wrong thinking, ego thinking, and then somehow bringing in a perspective of Dharma. And so the word that Luang uses is trust and awareness. So when, I think a question came out, I could include that answer. When you mentioned this morning that you'd gone through a period of low confidence for no reason, and that if it had been hard, but you got through it in 2 days, I'd expect you to say 2 months or even 2 years. And so that got my attention. So, something like that happened every other week when I was a young monk. And this happened after 5 years. So, what's that about? Well, in this case, it was a river that I had traveled on. And the early part of that travel on that river had been a lot of rocky rapids. And then it just seemed to be like almost to the ocean. And then I hit Niagara Falls. Kind of like that, isn't it? And I think you can see that experience was not foreign to my character. It was, it made sense to that youthful character, which was very, very shy and such like, and self-disparaging. And then those echoes of self-disparagement could often come up. But I do wonder, I don't have a canonical take on this, but I do wonder that when we implement all kinds of causes and conditions for goodness to be strong in our minds, and those causes and conditions are constantly reinforcing awareness, then perhaps there is that kind of upwelling of horror or whatever that is now, there's an intuitive capacity to be aware of it. Not even like fully conscious, but kind of intuitive, that just hang in, don't believe it. And the ego mind just wants you to believe it. No, I don't believe you. And you keep coming back, and then you're in the ocean. I don't know if that's. I mean, I don't think that's not uncommon in spiritual literature. But certainly for me, after that experience, it was life-threatening, or whatever. But at the end of it, there's tremendous peace and confidence. But it's not a peace that's constructed from like a kind of samatha practice that's put together and then is all kind of constructed, because that really lasts, because it's about nirodha, the cessation of desire. So it wasn't just about that particular habit, mind form that was there. It was also about desire, because when something comes up like that, so threatening, all your desires is saying, get out of here. I don't want you. Distract, do anything, right? And so I think it fits very well to the third noble truth, nirodha, cessation of craving. And how does craving cease? It ceases through endurance. You watch unfulfilled wanting, and you don't go for the object of your wanting. And psychologically, I mean, it's easy, like apple pie and ice cream. You just don't have the ice cream or something like that. That's pretty straightforward, or you do. But psychologically, that when things like that come up, there's a massive desire, because that seems so threatening, and one's way of operating with that has been either suppression, distraction, or believing and blaming and all the rest of it. Again, I don't know. We're all different. And I'm just kind of reminded of a book I read way back, like back in Chithurst. What was her name? Irina Tweedy. Anyone read that? That's a really old one. And it was something about dissolution of self. So she has these kind of fantastic openings of Satori, whatever tradition she was in. And then her mind just falls into the most abject hell realms. And it teaches us just witness, just witness, just witness. And she's safe. And she gets through it. She's angelic. And so I don't think that's uncommon. Not that I'm wishing it on you, and not that that's the way of enlightenment. I'm looking for my hell realm. I didn't get one this lifetime, this retreat. I wish you bliss, I really do. But should that come up, it's still a sankhara. It's a construct. Sankhara is a construct. It's still anicca. It's not permanent. It came into consciousness. It wasn't there before. And if it's a sankhara, then it is anicca, and it's not who you are. It's not, and you don't own it, even though you think you own it. It's not who you are. And that's where these teachings on dependent origination, that this dependent origination is, it uses the word sankata. Sankata is conditioned or constructed, and asankata is a negation of that. So it is one of the ways you define nibbana is the asankata, the unconstructed. Whereas the way you define emotion is that they're constructed. And that's where the teaching of paticca comes in, dependent origination, that this is a constructed thing. It comes because of histories and inputs and so on, and it's born into the mind when the causes and conditions are there for it to be born. But it is anicca dukkha anatta, and it's not who you are. You don't own this. You witness it, for sure. It's individual, for sure. So we talk about individual kamma. So that's when that language starts to click in, and that's very helpful in terms of trusting in awareness, because you're not just trusting in awareness. I mean, you are, but you're also trusting in this informed background from your practice that this is anicca dukkha anatta. I've been saying that for 50 years, I can't get it right. That it arose because of causes, and your search is for the uncaused. The uncaused, it's weird. the unconditioned, the deathless, the unborn, so that the awareness takes it to the unconditioned, or is the unconditioned, you could even say, whereas attachment, desire, takes it into the conditioned. So this massive thing comes into consciousness. If there's a background of study, practice, insight, which is informed by these really, really important ideas, then that's in play too. And that's what we call sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension. You have a comprehension about how this all works, even if on a superficial level it frightens you out of your socks or whatever you get frightened of. Even though that might be at a deeper level, at an intuitive level, because you've seen and understood this so many times, you have the equipment, the causes and conditions for this to be released from consciousness. Maybe it works that way. It seems to be for me. So the idea of stream of consciousness is that there is a witness to that, or there is witnessing, let's say. So we have the Bahiya Sutta. In the seeing, there's just the seeing. In the feeling, there's just the feeling. In the tasting, there's just the tasting. And that's always bringing it to witnessing. Let's say we look at this truncated tree here, which used to be an oak, and is now, and it was planted by Prince of Wales, right? I think so. That was planted by Prince of Wales, not the recent one. However, I think this is 125 years old. Was it something? Big age. So you look at it, and aesthetically, it's not pleasing. No. And that's true for most of us, all of us, except maybe if you're a oak salesman and you'd like to get the rest of the trunk. Oh, there's a few board of feet. I like that. It depends. Your perception of it depends. It depends, right? The squirrel looks at it. No nuts, I don't like it. Moves on. So it depends, my perception of it. Now, if I run with that, I could say, oh, why didn't they at least take the whole thing down? Right? We probably couldn't afford it. To take the rest of it down would cost you a lot of money. Or, I don't know, maybe they hoped it would grow back and it didn't, or whatever. So that's all causally related stuff, isn't it? But if you just look at the tree, and you don't even define a tree, it is as it is. And a stream of consciousness, that's silence. In the worldly ways, yeah, if you had to run this institution and you had those branches hanging over your roof and you broke, you'd probably take the option of cutting the branches off, because if you lost your roof, you'd probably have to close down. So there's probably a very logical reason for that. I'm sure they're tree huggers like all of us are. But so dependent origination is saying, well, it's caused. My perception of that tree is causally related. What's uncaused? What's not causally dependent? What is not causally dependent? And the only thing you really have is consciousness. Because it's like, could you say that consciousness is caused? Yeah, you say, yeah, well, you were born. Yeah. Well, I could say to you back. I could say, well, is consciousness in the body, or is the body in consciousness? I could ask you that. You probably couldn't prove either way. Maybe when you died, you could send me a postcard. or not. Or I can probably send you one, I don't know. We're all kind of close, aren't we? Some of us. So what's uncaused? What's not caused? I mean, this is the way I practice. And it's not just a lot of thinking. It's trying to get to the root of the subtle ideas that the Buddha is presenting. So when you kind of consider it that way, the only thing you have is presence. Is presence ever absent? Even when I'm absent-minded, there's presence. Is presence ever absent? You start to, my intuition is always you kind of go back to these metaphors, like the background, foreground, the deep sea, those kinds of things. And that those are intuitive ways of talking, because again, consciousness does not have any shape or color or distinction. So, and it's not a thing. Even the word background isn't really right, because that implies a thing called a background. Even that's not right, but analogies are always limited that way. So you start to just kind of, oh, that works, and then you start to sense the peace of knowing change. And then the informed part of your being, which understands this is anicca dukkha anatta, then gets you to things like Arnprior's constant admonishment. Meine means uncertain. Always, he was saying that, uncertain. He wouldn't say it's changing, he'd say it's uncertain. Especially in terms of perceptions and judgments. He was very good on that. You'd have a judgment about someone or something, and he'd look at you and he'd say, Meine, huh? You should know. You should know what's right or wrong. Meine. And that had kind of many nuances to it. So when you put that language into your flow of consciousness, and you, as some judgment comes up, and you need judgments and so on, or some emotion comes up, you start to put in things, Meine, it's uncertain. You start to have more space. You can still deal with your judgments and that, but you start to have more space. So the perception of change is a very important thing, because the more I bring up the perception of change, it touches the unchanging. All right? Doesn't that make sense? Like, how could I notice the difference between the light bulb and that perceptual change, or one, or like a body sense and a visual sense, or a changing sound, if there wasn't something unchanging? And what could that be but consciousness itself, awareness? So trust, then, there's that kind of philosophical, I guess, or whatever, analytical take on it. But then trust is not about desire, whereas preference is about desire, right? So I prefer the tree to be living. Great. And I like salt on my hash browns. Good for you, right? So that's preference, and preference goes out into the objects and tries to organize them in a pleasing way. And we all do that. I don't think, did anyone put maple syrup on their hash browns this morning? Oh, some might, you go for it. So we'll always be that way. We'll always put cream or not cream in our coffee and so on. So there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not a refuge, right? Hash browns are not a refuge. So the conditioned world is not a refuge because it's unreliable, it's uncertain. So desire, that's why we're a bit down on desire. Not that desire is wrong, but to think that following desire, which is always about the experiences, is going to lead to the unconditioned, is a fallacy. It cannot happen. It cannot possibly work, because it'll always pick up the conditioned, and the condition will change into something which is unsatisfactory. So the abandonment of desire is not a rejection of it. Thou shalt not put salt on your hash browns. It's not that. It's not like a hard-edged, you cannot enjoy yourself, or it's not about that. It's just that desire's function is for happiness in that sense. Fine. It's limited, but turning back to the heart is non-desire, relating to that which is changing from non-desire. And what is non-desire? Well, to me it's compassion. Compassion felt is not desire. Compassion acted on certainly can be desire. It's different. When you really feel compassion, it's not about desire, it's about empathy. Afterwards, yeah, I want to do something to help that person. But it's a felt sense, it's not desire. Gratitude, forgiveness, generosity, all those beautiful parts of the human spirit are about non-desire. So the more we do, we're a very generous and loving community, the more we do that moves towards trust. We start to live in a trusting universe, an inner universe, more and more towards trust. In a lot of the spiritual traditions, we have words like surrender. So, especially in theistic traditions, I was just reading a prayer by Father Michael, who died in the deserts of Algeria, and it's like, it's kind of like, "Oh Father, give me even more suffering," which sounds a bit heavy, but I was just reading it for the sake of, well, how do you guys do trust? Now, I don't use theistic models because I'm not grown up with that, but I don't reject them. I don't know how that works for someone. Or say, models from Hinduism, a Brahman, and Atman, things like that. So trust is something that to me is felt. It's not just believed in. And then the more I learn how to go from the heart from the heart. I'm just wanted to see if you're awake. That's why I did that. Honest. I'm losing it. From the heart, from the head to the heart. And it's a cliche, I know, but it can be viscerally experienced. You can, like in your meditation, when there's a lot of thought and stress, it's in your brain. Your mushy brain is stressed, and your eyes are stressed, and your temples are stressed, and then you can learn to bring attention deliberately down, and feel the tightness of the throat, and let it abide at the heart. You can do that. You can do that with imagery. You can do that just with body awareness. And I think that's tremendous. I think we all do that, obviously. But do it, we all experience love, I think, in that way. I don't experience love through my right kneecap. I don't know, maybe you do. Or not my left kneecap's even worse. So there's something about this region which is significant. And to awaken that is, I think, also part of the whole idea of trust. And how do you awaken that? Well, you try to bring up imagery that stimulate that, or narratives, so like I say, I use a lot of pictures, maybe devotional chanting, to start, not just to start, but to activate that, because we are probably over intellectual. We've developed our cultures and our livelihoods have really developed intellect a lot, because like just computers and all the things you need to know about computers and all the head trips that you're involved in writing and criticizing and analyzing, that's a strength we have, but it's also then can be an imbalance. So it's a kind of simplicity of loving kindness, the simplicity of gratitude. These are things which are to be encouraged, just as trust is. So you kind of, like Lompa Liam, a lot of his talks now, maybe always have been. Lompa Liam's the successor to Lompa Cha at Lompa Cha's monastery, Wat Pah Pong. He was visiting us in the spring. Beautiful man. Lovely man. His admonitions or his instructions are gratitude and payback. Katanyo Katavedi. Not just gratitude, payback, like give back, give. And he just does that all the time. Really, really simple, really, really simple. And it always hits you, yeah. So when the mind gets caught up in its narratives, if you see them as Dhamma, then if you see them as Dhamma, you see as anicca dukkha anatta. If you're inclining to the unconditioned, you don't attach, because you know that's not the direction, not that it's wrong, and you learn how to come back to awareness. If you don't see them as Dhamma, well, then you suffer. You suffer the patterns that you've suffered. And you create narratives, we all do that. And then you get burnt, and then something wakes you up, and so complaining feels like this. And then you're back home again. And then you keep coming home again. So when you wake up in the mornings, what's the first? In morning, like, me, I'm always selling morning meditation, right? That's my sales pitch for this lifetime. Do your morning practice. And right when you get up, what is the mood of the mind? Right, like as soon as possible, because you're coming, like if you've been in deep sleep recently, like that night, recently, like last week. No, I mean like that night. You're coming out of deep sleep. You're coming out of nibbana. I mean, that's what it's like where the whole ego structure isn't yakking away. So you're very close to truth. And then the world gets born into consciousness, your problems, your situation, relationships, and thought begins to generate a sense of self out of necessity, but still. And then if you kind of, right, what's the mood of the mind? Right from the get-go, that's the mood is creating a sense of self. So, I know you. And then maybe you say, yeah, I'll trust in awareness. Go back to the silence. Go back to bed. So if you can, like when you wake up tomorrow morning, and if you wake up early, and you it's too early for you, take yoga nidra. Just get into yoga nidra. Don't think you have to sit cross-legged, but don't toss and turn. I mean, I won't be watching. You can toss and turn. But don't get caught in the desire to fall asleep if you're restless, because you can make the mind quite calm in that situation. So then take yoga nidra, and it says like this. See, that might be quite useful. Sometimes you don't need that much sleep. Sometimes you do. And if you're really exhausted and you hear the bell and you want to sleep to breakfast, then sleep to breakfast. If you need to sleep, you need to sleep, right? Neither way is better than the other. Okay, I think I'll leave it there. Finish with verses of sharing note.